In the vast, untamed heart of the West, the truest compass is not forged of steel but of courage. It points not north, but towards justice and truth. The high mountain sun warmed the pine needles, releasing their sharp scent into the air. Amelia moved with a practiced grace, her calico dress brushing against sagebrush as she gathered herbs. Her basket was nearly full of yarrow and comfrey. She paused, listening to the vast silence of the wilderness, a silence that was her companion and teacher. Then, a sound unlike the call of a hawk or the rustle of a deer reached her. It was a shout, cut short, followed by the harsh crack of a firearm. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, a violent intrusion into the peaceful afternoon. Her breath caught in her throat. Trouble was a rare visitor in her secluded world, but she recognized its voice instantly. Amelia crept toward the source of the noise, her boots silent on the dusty ground. Below her, in a shallow creek bed, she saw them. Two rough-looking men stood over a figure lying motionless in the water. The fallen man was Kiowa, his dark hair matted with water and blood, his buckskin clothing torn. One of the bounty hunters nudged him with a boot. "He is not moving. Maybe you finally hit something, Marcus." The other man laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "He is worth more alive, Cole. But a dead savage is better than no money at all." Amelia pressed herself against a boulder, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had to do something. She could not leave him to them. She watched as the two men argued, their voices carrying on the thin air. They seemed more interested in blaming each other than securing their prize. This was her chance. Amelia scanned the terrain, her mind racing. A short distance away, a thicket of aspen grew, their leaves trembling in the breeze. If she could create a diversion, she might be able to draw them away. With a steady hand, she picked up a loose rock and hurled it deep into the trees. It crashed through the branches with a loud noise. The men spun around, their hands flying to their firearms. "What was that?" Cole whispered, his eyes wide. "A bear, maybe," Marcus grumbled, moving to investigate. As the bounty hunters cautiously moved toward the aspen grove, Amelia scrambled down the rocky slope. The Kiowa warrior was heavier than he looked, a dead weight in her arms. She struggled, her muscles straining as she dragged him from the creek and into the cover of the dense pines. He was breathing, but it was shallow and ragged. A dark stain spread across his side. Every step was a monumental effort, the scent of his blood sharp in her nostrils. She did not know his name or his crime, only that he was a human being left to die. As dusk began to settle, she finally reached the hidden path that led to her small, isolated cabin, praying she had not been seen. Inside her cabin, the warm glow of a lantern pushed back the shadows. Amelia worked tirelessly, cleaning the warrior's wound with a poultice of boiled willow bark. The projectile had gone clean through. A small miracle, but he had lost a great deal of blood, and a fever was setting in. She brewed a strong tea of echinacea and fed it to him spoonful by spoonful, though he remained unconscious. For 2 days and nights, she did not sleep, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening to his fevered murmurs. She was the daughter of a doctor, and though her father disapproved of her herbal remedies, he had taught her much about the art of healing. She would not let this man die. On the third morning his eyes opened. They were dark and intelligent, but filled with a deep, primal caution. He tried to sit up, his hand instinctively going to his side, but a wave of pain stopped him. "Be still," Amelia said softly, her voice calm and even. "You are safe here." He stared at her, his gaze intense, searching. He did not see a threat, only a woman with tired eyes and gentle hands. He did not speak, but the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. He was weak, vulnerable, and completely at the mercy of this stranger. He had survived the bounty hunters, but he did not yet know if he had found a friend or a more patient kind of enemy. She brought him a bowl of thin broth, and he drank it slowly, never taking his eyes off her. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice a dry whisper. The single word held a universe of questions. Why did you help me? Why risk yourself for a stranger, an outcast? Because you were hurt, Amelia answered simply, as if it were the most obvious reason in the world. My father is a doctor. He taught me to mend what is broken. A slow understanding dawned in his eyes. He saw the honesty in her face, the simple compassion that asked for nothing in return. I am called Wind, he said, a formal introduction, an offering of trust. I am Amelia, she replied, a small smile touching her lips for the first time in days. Over the next few days, as his strength returned, Wind told her his story. He spoke of the town of redemption, of the bank that held the treaty money for his people. He had been there to trade when he was accused of robbing it. A wanted poster was issued, bearing his likeness and a large reward. I did not do this thing, he said, his voice low and firm with conviction. The banker, a man named Henry, he has a darkness in his eyes. He spoke of progress, but his words were hollow. I believe he is the one who stole the money, and he uses me to cover his trail. Amelia listened, her heart aching for the injustice. She looked at Wind, at his proud bearing and honest gaze, and she knew he spoke the truth. Wind described the day of the robbery in vivid detail. He had been in the general store across from the bank. He remembered seeing Henry the banker meeting with two rough men earlier that morning. They were the same men who had hunted him in the mountains. He had not thought much of it then, but now the memory was a sharp and damning piece of a larger puzzle. He recalled the way Henry had avoided his gaze, the nervous twitch in the banker's hand as he locked the bank doors early that day. It was the behavior of a guilty man, not a victim. Wind's instincts, honed by a life in the wild, had told him something was deeply wrong in that town. The accusation came swiftly. The sheriff, a man loyal to the powerful banker, had declared Wind the culprit without any real investigation. The wanted poster was printed by nightfall. It claimed he was a dangerous renegade, a threat to all civilized folk. The lie was a poison that spread through the territory, turning every man with a firearm into a potential executioner. The bounty was large enough to make a man forget his conscience, to see a Kiowa warrior not as a person, but as a bag of gold coins. He was forced to flee, to live like a hunted animal, his name and his honor stolen from him by a man in a tailored suit. As Amelia listened, her belief in his innocence solidified into a cold, hard certainty. She saw the pain and frustration in his eyes, the burden of a crime he did not commit. A powerful connection was growing between them, an unspoken bond forged in secrecy and shared danger. It went beyond gratitude or compassion. When she looked at him, she saw not a fugitive, but a man of immense strength and integrity. His quiet dignity and the gentle way he spoke of his people stirred something deep within her. She found herself watching him, memorizing the line of his jaw, the cadence of his voice. She was falling in love. She made a decision. It was a dangerous, reckless choice that went against every rule of survival in this harsh land. Helping him was a crime. If they were caught, she would be judged as his accomplice, an outcast from her own people. But the thought of sending him away, of letting him face the world alone, was unbearable. I will help you, she said, her voice unwavering. We will find a way to prove your innocence. Wind looked at her, his expression a mixture of surprise and profound gratitude. He saw the fire in her eyes, the fierce determination. For the first time since he had fled redemption, he felt a flicker of hope. A week passed. Wind was growing stronger, but he was not yet ready to travel. Amelia began to feel a new kind of tension. The wilderness no longer felt like a sanctuary. She started noticing small, unnatural things on her daily walks. A branch bent in a way that the wind could not have made. A series of footprints, not her own, near the spring where she collected water. They were faint, already fading, but they were there. Someone was searching for them, moving with a patient, methodical skill. The bounty hunters had not given up. They were circling, closing in, and it was only a matter of time before they found her cabin. She told Wind what she had seen. He examined the sketch she drew of the footprint in the dirt floor of the cabin. They are close, he said, his voice grim. They move like wolves, testing the wind. He took a piece of charcoal from the hearth and showed her how to mark a trail with signs only a Kiowa would understand. a way to communicate silently across the land. It was a small lesson, a moment of shared knowledge that brought them closer. In his quiet instruction, she felt the depth of his connection to the world, a world she was only just beginning to understand. The danger was real, but in his presence she did not feel as afraid. Amelia knew they could not win a fight with firearms. Wind was still injured, and she had never used a firearm in her life. She needed a different kind of weapon, one that came from her own world of roots and leaves. Her mind turned to the old stories her grandmother used to tell, tales of potent plants and their hidden powers. She remembered one story in particular about a rare mountain root that, when burned with a specific type of fungus, created a thick, acrid smoke. A smoke that could overwhelm the senses, that could steal a man's sight for a short time, leaving him helpless and confused. She knew where to find the plants. The root grew only on the highest, sun-scorched ridges, and the fungus thrived in the damp, dark corners of the deepest parts of the forest. It took her an entire day to gather what she needed, her basket filled with the strange, potent ingredients. Back in the cabin, she worked by lantern light, carefully grinding the root into a fine powder and mixing it with the dried fungus and a handful of sulfurous minerals. The resulting mixture was a dull gray powder. It looked harmless, but Amelia knew it held a power that might be their only chance for survival. She had become more than a healer. She was preparing for war. The morning air was cold and sharp. A thin mist clung to the pines, muffling the sounds of the forest. Marcus and Cole moved through the trees like ghosts, their eyes fixed on the thin curl of smoke rising from the cabin's chimney. They had found it. After days of searching, their persistence had paid off. "There it is," Marcus whispered, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "The little bird and her pet savage. They thought they could hide from us." Cole checked the load in his firearm, the metallic click loud in the stillness. "The reward is as good as ours. Let us finish this. I want a drink in a warm saloon by nightfall." They took their positions, one on each side of the small cabin, using the large boulders for cover. They were confident, arrogant. It was two of them against a wounded man and a woman. The odds were in their favor. "This is for the heathens who think they can hide from the law," Marcus muttered to himself, raising his firearm. He despised the Kiowa, saw them as nothing more than obstacles to progress, a wildness that needed to be tamed or destroyed. He did not care about justice or the truth of the bank robbery. He cared only for the money and the satisfaction of the hunt. This was not about the law. It was about hate. "You in the cabin," Marcus shouted, his voice booming in the quiet morning. "Send out the Kiowa fugitive. We know he is in there. Do it now, and the woman will not be harmed." Inside, Amelia and Wind exchanged a look. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, but her face was a mask of calm resolve. She moved to the window, peering through a small gap in the curtains. "He is an innocent man," she called out, her voice clear and strong, betraying none of the fear she felt. "You are the criminals, hunting a man for money," Cole laughed. "Innocent? They are all savages. Now send him out before we burn you out." Wind stood beside the hearth, his body tense. He was ready to fight, to die protecting the woman who had saved him. He held a heavy iron poker, his only weapon. Amelia gave him a reassuring nod and moved toward the fireplace. She held the small deerskin pouch containing her gray powder. The first shot rang out, and a piece of the wooden door frame splintered, sending shards of wood flying into the room. The assault had begun. There was no more time for talk, no chance for a peaceful resolution. The bounty hunters were done waiting. They were coming to claim their prize, dead or alive. With a steady hand, Amelia threw the deerskin pouch into the heart of the fire. There was a soft whoosh, and then the fireplace belched a thick, roiling cloud of gray smoke. It did not rise up the chimney as normal smoke would. Instead, it poured out into the small room and then billowed out of the open windows and the chimney top in an unnatural, dense fog. It smelled of sulfur and bitter roots, a foul, choking odor that clung to the air. Outside, the world was instantly obscured. The clear mountain morning was swallowed by a swirling, impenetrable gray mist that hugged the ground and blinded the eye. Marcus and Cole were completely unprepared. The smoke washed over them, and they began to cough violently, their lungs burning. But the worst part was the effect on their eyes. It was like having sand and hot ash thrown directly into their faces. A searing pain blinded them, and their vision dissolved into a watery, agonizing blur. "I cannot see!" Cole screamed, stumbling backward and firing his weapon blindly into the smoke. Marcus cursed, rubbing his eyes frantically, but it only made the burning worse. They were lost, disoriented, their greatest advantage, their sight, completely stolen from them. Through the chaos, Wind moved. The smoke affected him too, but he had been prepared. He had tied a damp cloth over his nose and mouth, and he kept his eyes squinted, nearly shut. He moved not by sight, but by sound and instinct, a silent predator in the mist he and Amelia had created. He heard Cole's panicked shouts to his left, and the sound of Marcus crashing through a bush to his right. They were separated, confused and terrified. Their arrogance had vanished, replaced by the primal fear of an enemy they could not see. They were no longer hunters. They were the prey. Wind reached Cole first. The man was waving his firearm around wildly. Wind used the iron poker, striking the man's wrist with a hard, precise blow. The firearm clattered to the ground. Before Cole could even cry out, Wind struck him again at the base of the skull, a calculated, non-lethal blow that sent him slumping to the ground, unconscious. He then turned toward Marcus. The other bounty hunter was trying to retreat, crawling away from the cabin. Wind was on him in a heartbeat, disarming him with similar brutal efficiency. He left both men alive, but they were beaten, their hunt over. Silence returned to the mountainside. They used the bounty hunters' own ropes to tie them securely to a large pine tree. Marcus glared at them with his smoke-reddened eyes, his face a mask of pure hatred. Cole was still unconscious. "You will not get away with this," Marcus snarled. "The law will hunt you down." Amelia looked at him, her fear replaced by a cold anger. "The law is what we are going to find," she said. "The real law, not the kind that pays for false accusations." They took the men's firearms and their horses. They could not stay at the cabin any longer. Their only path now led to redemption, to the heart of the danger. Before they left, they stood for a moment in the quiet cabin that had been their sanctuary. The air was still hazy with the lingering smoke. Wind turned to Amelia, his dark eyes searching her face. "You saved my life again," he said, his voice filled with an emotion she could not quite name. It was more than gratitude. It was awe. "We saved each other," she replied softly. He reached out and gently touched a stray strand of her hair, his touch sending a shiver through her. In that small gesture, a promise was made, a bond of loyalty and affection that needed no words. They were in this together, until the end. The journey to redemption was fraught with tension. They traveled through dense forests and hidden valleys, avoiding the main trails where they might encounter a sheriff's posse or other bounty hunters. Wind led the way, his senses alert to every sound, every sign. He taught Amelia how to read the land, how to listen to the language of the birds and the trees. She, in turn, shared her knowledge of the plants they passed, pointing out which were for healing and which were for sustenance. They spoke little, but their silence was comfortable, filled with a growing understanding and a deep, unspoken care for one another. They arrived at the outskirts of the town late the next night, hiding their horses in a grove of cottonwood trees by the river. Redemption lay before them, a collection of wooden buildings bathed in the pale moonlight. It looked peaceful, asleep, but they knew that behind one of those dark windows, a man named Henry was counting his stolen money, confident that his crimes were safely buried. They watched the sheriff's office, saw the warm glow of a lamp inside. They would have to be careful. Their plan was dangerous, and any mistake would land them both at the end of a rope. Wind studied the layout of the town, his memory sharp. The bank was on the main street, a sturdy brick building that seemed impenetrable. But he remembered a narrow alley that ran behind it. The banker's office, he recalled, had a single window facing that alley. It was their only way in. "I will go," he said to Amelia. "You must stay here, where it is safe." She shook her head, her jaw set with determination. "No, we do this together. I will not hide while you take all the risk. I can create a diversion, draw the sheriff away from the center of town. It will give you the time you need." He saw it was useless to argue. Amelia took a small bundle of the smoke-producing herbs she had brought with her. She made her way to the far end of town, near the stables. She found a pile of dry hay and brush, far enough from any buildings to be safe, but close enough to cause alarm. She set the herbs inside and lit them. The same thick, gray smoke she had used at the cabin began to pour into the night air. It was not a large fire, but the smoke was dramatic and unsettling. Soon a man shouted, "Fire!" Doors opened and lights appeared in windows. The town began to stir, its attention focused entirely on the stables. As the town bell began to ring and people ran toward the smoke, Wynne slipped into the shadows of the alley behind the bank. The sheriff and his deputy ran right past the alley's entrance, their focus on the commotion across town. The banker's window was dark. Using the hilt of his knife, Wynne carefully worked at the latch. The wood was old, and it gave way with a soft crack. He slid the window open and slipped inside, silent as a phantom. The office smelled of stale cigar smoke and money. He lit a match, the small flame dancing in the darkness, and began his search. He knew he did not have much time. He ignored the main safe. The banker would not hide his personal crime in such an obvious place. Wynne ran his hands along the wooden panels of the walls, searching for anything unusual. Behind a large, framed portrait of the territorial governor, his fingers found a loose board. He pried it open. Inside was a small, hidden compartment, and within that compartment was a thin, leather-bound ledger. He opened it. The matchlight flickered across neat columns of figures, detailing dates and amounts that corresponded not with the bank's official records, but with a secret criminal enterprise. He had found it. Just as Wynne was about to leave, the office door swung open. Henry the banker stood there, a lantern in one hand and a small firearm in the other. His face was pale with rage and fear. "I knew it," he hissed. "I knew a savage would not be smart enough to steal, only to break things." He had seen the open window from the street and had come to investigate, leaving the town's fire to the sheriff. His eyes fell on the open ledger in Wynne's hand, and his face contorted into a snarl of pure desperation. He had been discovered. His carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Henry raised his firearm. "Give me the book, heathen!" Wynne did not move. He held the ledger tightly, his eyes locked on the banker. He knew that the book was his only shield. As Henry took a step forward, Wynne kicked the heavy oak desk with all his might. It slid across the floor, crashing into the banker and sending him off balance. The firearm discharged, the shot going wild and shattering a glass lamp on the wall. The two men struggled in the semi-darkness, a desperate fight for the truth. Wynne was stronger, but his side was still healing, and pain shot through him as they wrestled for the firearm. The sound of the shot brought Amelia running. She had seen Henry enter the bank and had followed, her heart pounding with dread. She arrived at the office door just as the sheriff, drawn by the noise, came running from the other direction. "Sheriff, stop!" Amelia cried out, holding up the second, smaller ledger she had found in Henry's desk drawer during the struggle. "This is Henry's real account book. It proves he stole the treaty money." The sheriff paused, his gaze shifting from the fight to the book in Amelia's hand, and then to the panicked, guilty expression on the banker's face. The sheriff, a man who valued order above all, finally saw the truth. He saw the wild-eyed desperation of the banker and the steady, resolute calm of the Kiowa warrior. He saw the proof in Amelia's hands. He drew his own firearm and pointed it at Henry. "It is over, Henry. Drop your weapon." Defeated, the banker let his firearm clatter to the floor. His reign of lies had ended. As the sheriff clamped irons on Henry's wrists, Wynne looked at Amelia across the chaotic room. In her eyes, he saw not only courage, but a future. The nightmare was finally over. Justice, it turned out, could be found even in redemption. The news of Henry's deception spread through redemption like a wildfire. The secret ledger revealed years of embezzlement and fraud. The treaty money was recovered from its hiding place under the floorboards of the bank. Wynne's name was cleared, the bounty was rescinded, and the bounty hunters, Marcus and Cole, were arrested for their part in the conspiracy. The townspeople, who had been so quick to condemn the outsider, were now forced to confront their own prejudice. They looked at Wind with a new, grudging respect. He had been wronged, and he had fought for his honor. Amelia and Wind stood in the morning sun outside the sheriff's office. The town seemed different now, smaller and less intimidating. She had faced its judgment and had emerged stronger. She had discovered a courage within herself that she never knew she possessed. Wind stood beside her, no longer a fugitive, but a free man. He looked out at the distant mountains, his homeland. A quiet sadness touched his features. His path was clear, but it was a path that led away from her. The thought of their separation was a physical pain in her chest. He turned to her, his expression serious. "I must return to my people," he said, his voice low. "They will be waiting for news of the treaty money. My place is with them." Amelia nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She had known this moment would come. "I will not forget what you have done for me, Amelia. You have a brave heart, the heart of a warrior." He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "I wish," he began, but did not finish the sentence. The chasm between their two worlds seemed too wide to cross. An impossible choice lay before them. Amelia looked from his face to the town around her, and then to the mountains that had always been her true home. She realized her place was no longer here, among these people and their narrow judgments. Her adventure with Wind had awakened a part of her that could never go back to sleep. "My father's world is here in this town," she said, her voice finding its strength. "But my world is out there, in the mountains, where life is honest and true." She looked up at him, her decision made. "If you will have me, I will go with you." A slow, brilliant smile spread across Wind's face. He held her hand tighter. Together they turned away from the town and walked toward the mountains, their future a wide, open frontier.